In today's video, we uncover the shocking case of Stacy Hunsucker, whose sudden death first appeared to be a medical tragedy. Stacy Hunsucker, who was 32 years old, called Mount Holly, North Carolina, home. In high school, she fell in love with Joshua and they married. Together, they had 2 children, Piper and Willow. She was a great mother and a happy person, according to everyone who met her. But something bad was going on behind this picture of happy family life. Stacy Robinson Hunsucker was born in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. Her parents are John Robinson and Susie Robinson. Eric and Paul were her brothers, and Amy was her sister. When she was done with high school, she went to Gaston College and got an associate degree in paralegal studies. Before she went into teaching, which was what she really loved, she worked as a lawyer at Ted Grieve and Associates in Reagan & Reagan. Then she worked at the YMCA, then at First Baptist Charlotte's Preschool, and finally at First Methodist Preschool in Mount Holly. Shelley O'Day, her friend, said she was good at making crafts because she sold painted wooden signs. In the summer of 2018, O'Day went to Stacy's house to get a $50 welcome sign she had bought there. This is where she met Joshua Lee Hunsucker at work in a department store. She was 2 years taller than him, which was the first thing he noticed about her. For reference, Stacy was 5 feet 11 inches and Joshua was 6 feet 5 inches. His advances were declined several times by her. Joshua didn't give up, though. He learned she played softball, went to her practice, and joined her team. Both were good players who had the chance to become professionals. Their friendship turned into love over time. The wedding took place in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, in 2010. People thought they were happy because they had been together since high school. Their 2 girls, Piper Elizabeth and Willow Darlene, were born. It had been 7 years since Joshua started working as a flight nurse for Atrium Health's MedCenter Air. He was confident and convincing because he used to play college football. Stacy gave up her job to care for her kids full-time. On weekends, Stacy and Joshua spent time with friends at shows and cookouts. According to O'Day, they were just a cute pair. They never got into a fight. Stacy had been a member of Mount Holly United Methodist Church all her life and took part in many events and groups there. She liked to make things, go to the beach, watch sports, and take pictures of herself and her girls. But problems were happening below the surface. After the birth of their first daughter, Piper, in February 2013, Stacy started having strange health problems that she couldn't explain. The signs weren't clear, but they were very scary. Her health seemed to be getting worse for no clear reason, which made doctors confused. After just 5 months in July 2013, bad things happened. Their house caught on fire, and most of the couple's things were destroyed. Both mentally and financially, the fire left them in a mess. The things they had worked for were taken away. Their friends came together to help the young family get back on its feet. Suzanne Steinbroner, a friend of the couple, started a GoFundMe page to help pay for the rising costs. The page would start to record Stacy's strange medical fall. Stacy's health issues, on the other hand, kept getting worse. After the birth of their second daughter, Willow, in November 2014, Stacy was taken to the hospital because her heart rate and blood pressure were too low to be safe. Her stay in the urgent care unit lasted several days. The medical team did many tests to try to figure out what was wrong, but they couldn't figure it out. There was a feeling that her body was being attacked by something beyond her sight. Suzanne added more information to Stacy's GoFundMe page about her health. Many tests later, she wrote, the doctor still didn't know what was going on. Stacy was readmitted in January 2015 with a low heart rate. In this case, the situation became very dangerous to life. She had a heart attack as soon as she got to her room. Her heart just stopped beating. Doctors were scrambling to figure out what was wrong with this young woman while she was on a ventilator to help her breathe. As February 2015 came around, a choice was made that shocked everyone. A pacemaker was put in Stacy's heart. This was too harsh for a woman who wasn't even 30 years old yet. If someone so young needed a gadget to control their heartbeat, it meant that something very, very badly was wrong with her heart's electrical system. Not a soul knew at the time that these were not normal health issues at all. After looking back, it was found that all of Stacy's symptoms were consistent with being poisoned by tetrahydrosaline, a chemical that can have major effects on the heart and body, and can even kill. The pattern had been there the whole time. Episodes of low blood pressure and heart rate that doctors couldn't explain, sudden cardiac events that doctors couldn't figure out, and a young woman who had no family history of heart disease who needed a pacemaker all of a sudden. Joshua would have known exactly what signs to look for because he had a lot of medical training as a flight paramedic. He would have been able to give the poison in amounts that wouldn't kill right away, but would make the person's health worse over time. Normal medical tests would not have shown it to him that much. He knew. He should have known that the doctors would say her heart was to blame and not poisons. She always had to think about her mother Susie. She would call her daughter right away to make sure everything was okay if she had a dream that something was wrong. She had the sense of a mother that something wasn't right, but she couldn't say what. Due to the medical issues, another terrible problem arose: crushing debt. Even though the GoFundMe effort helped, there was a lot of financial stress because of the hospital stays, specialist visits, surgery for the pacemaker, and all ongoing care. The bills never stopped coming. Joshua was planning something much worse than anyone could have thought the whole time. He was poisoning his wife slowly and carefully, making a medical background that would make her sudden death seem normal, unsurprising, and inevitable. Later that same day, on September 23, 2018, Joshua called 911. He told the cops that he had found his 32-year-old wife not breathing. She was leaning against the side of the couch, but his story about what he was doing before he found her kept changing based on who he was talking to. He told cops at the scene that he had gone outside to make sure their cars were locked. He said that there had been a lot of car thefts in the area lately. He checked to make sure their cars were safe. The story made sense. That's not what he told one friend. He said he went for a walk to get some exercise. Yet another friend got a different story from him. This time he said he had been cutting wood for signs in the backyard. There is a third story that goes against the first two. He told Susie, his mother-in-law, that he had been working on his laptop at the kitchen table while turning his back on Stacy. He said that when he turned around he saw her lazily leaning against the couch. An additional account of what happened. For various stories, it doesn't matter what someone was doing when they found a loved one dead as long as they are saying the truth. There is no such thing as lies. When rescuers got there, Stacy wasn't moving or responding. The color of her was blue. That woman wasn't breathing. Even though they rushed her to the hospital, it was too late. The police said that Stacy Robinson Hunsucker was dead. Everyone involved saw the cause of death right away. Heart arrest. She had heart issues that were well known. She was fitted with a pacemaker. She had had strange heart problems in the past. The local cops thought it was a natural death, that the young woman's heart had just stopped beating. It was sad, but not suspicious. However, Joshua's actions in the following hours and days showed that there was something very wrong. He wouldn't let the doctor do an autopsy, even though Stacy had signed up to be an organ donor, and it was very odd for someone to refuse to have an autopsy. He was adamant about it. However, Joshua was adamant and wouldn't give in. The body of Stacy was burned within 2 days. The speed was really fast, almost rude. Most families take weeks to plan cremations because they need time to deal with their sadness, say goodbye properly, and make thoughtful plans. Joshua burned her alive almost right away, as if he couldn't wait to get rid of the proof of what he had done. Joshua also made a claim on her $250,000 life insurance coverage in the same 2 days. In fact, there were two policies, one for $200,000 that could pay $100,000 in damages twice, and another for $50,000. Joshua only gave him one of each. The plans for the funeral told their own sad story. Not Stacy's husband, but her parents planned and paid for her burial. Joshua didn't seem involved in any way. He was more like an observer than a mourning widower. He acted like he wasn't sad about the death of his wife of 8 years and the mother of his 2 young girls. Julia McDonald was hired by Joshua to watch Piper and Willow after Stacy's death. What she saw over the next few months was very upsetting. She later told CBS 48 Hours reporter Peter Van Sant exactly what she had seen, and what she said was very scary. She told him she had never seen him sad. It never happened. Not once. He wasn't upset. The man didn't look sad. It didn't look like he missed his wife at all. He was actually very happy. He was pleased with his new partner, Jennifer Elkins, a coworker who everyone called Jen. It was always them touching each other. Jen was always the focus, Kaylin said. They always talked about moving in together and their future together. Not the house that Joshua and Stacy had lived in together, but a brand new one starting over. Joshua didn't talk about his dead wife very often. He did not say that he missed Stacy. He never said that he missed the girl's Moma. His daughters never heard him talk about his memories of her. It seemed like Stacy had never been there. She had been erased from their lives. It was hard for Kaylin to understand. After her own father died, she couldn't stop talking about him and remembering good times with him. She wanted to keep his memory alive. 6 months after Stacy's death, Joshua and his 2 young girls were around his new girlfriend. He had lived in the house with his wife before she moved in. It was the house where Stacy had died and the bed where Stacy had slept. It seemed like she was just filling in for Stacy, taking on a part that had been left open. People who work with Joshua at Atrium Health's MedCenter Air had also seen the same troubling trend. Investigators were told that Joshua didn't seem to be moved at all by the death of his wife. In their report to the police, they were very worried about how quickly he had moved on with his girlfriend, how noticeable she was, and how well she fit into his life. The speed was rude, crazy, and out of line. According to them, he seemed unfazed, as if Stacy's death were just a bother and not a tragedy, like he was waiting for it to happen. After that, there was the cash. People in the community were shocked when Joshua went on a shopping spree after getting the $250,000 from Stacy's life insurance policies. A boat worth between $80,000 and $100,000 was the one he bought. Later, the judge would say that the buy worried him and tell Joshua's lawyer that he would go back to jail if he tried to hide it. He went on several pricey trips with his new girlfriend. The couple is going on trips they couldn't afford when Stacy was living because they were too busy paying off medical debt. After getting insurance money, they were living it up, traveling, and spending a lot of money. That day, he paid off the family's $215,380 debt on their 1,516-square-foot home in Mount Holly. These expenses were listed in the wrongful death case that Stacy's parents later filed. They painted a picture of a man who was thrilled to be free, thrilled to have money, and thrilled to start a new life with his mistress. Susie, Stacy's mom, saw these as huge, obvious red flags. Joshua had been seeing this woman before her daughter died. She found out, while Stacy was still living and fighting for her life in intensive care units. The affair went on behind her back. The life insurance claims were made just a few days after Stacy died, before the funeral even happened. In Susie's mind, the random insurance claims, the rejection of an autopsy, the immediate cremation, the new girlfriend who had been there the whole time, and her daughter's years of strange health problems that no doctor could explain were all starting to fit together. The boat, the trips, and the lack of any sadness. Definitely something was wrong. Susie Robinson did something that would change everything in May 2019, 9 months after her daughter died. She called the insurance department of North Carolina. She said her son-in-law was guilty of theft. She thought he had killed Stacy for the insurance money so he could date his lover without having to go through the trouble of getting a divorce. This mom's instinct didn't tell her that this simple action would lead to a full-on murder case that would reveal the horrible truth about what had happened to her daughter. Commissioner of Insurance Mike Causey said that the case was sent straight to their criminal investigation section. When Susie Robinson sent the tip, the local police force first said that Stacy had died of a natural cause, a heart attack. There is nothing fishy. No more changes needed. Put it in a folder. The insurance inspectors weren't happy, though. They would look further. Things would be questioned by them. The proof would lead them anywhere. Detectives from the North Carolina Department of Insurance's Criminal Investigations Division, the Gaston County Police, and the Department of Homeland Security made up the strong team. Lisa Morgan, a special agent, was given the job. In the course of her investigation, she found something that was truly essential. Stacy was an organ donor, so the LifeShare Donor Center kept a sample of her blood until she was cremated. This was normal procedure for organ donors, done to speed up the donation process and make sure the donors and recipients were compatible. But the one piece of proof that Joshua hadn't planned for, hadn't counted on, and couldn't destroy would make the difference between justice and a perfect crime. A sample of blood was sent to a lab for full toxicology tests. Normal tests for drugs and poisons came back clean. There is nothing strange or odd going on. However, the police did not end their work there. In order to find substances that wouldn't usually be on a regular toxicology panel, they asked for more specialized tests and a wider screening. The outcomes were truly shocking. According to Mike Causey, Stacy's blood had small amounts of poison in it. The poison was tetrahydrosaline, a drug that is used in eye drops to make them less red. But that level wasn't helpful, and it wasn't something that would be expected from normal use. It had 30 to 40 times the amount that is recommended for health. These levels weren't consistent with someone using eye drops as recommended or taking in a small amount by accident. Those amounts could only have been reached by poisoning someone over and over again in a planned way. Forensic toxicologist Demi Garvin looked over the results and became more and more worried. She said that because tetrahydrosaline was present in that amount, it had to be looked into further. It was like Mickey Finn in current times where something is put into a drink without the person's permission. It would be especially dangerous for someone with Stacy's known heart problem, someone with a pacemaker, or someone whose heart was already weak. Her weakest point, her most susceptible system, would be hit by the poison, which would make her death look like any other terrible heart event. It's also very important to note that normal toxicology screens don't usually check for it. It's not usually on the list of things that doctors look for when they think someone has been poisoned. You will not find tetrahydrosaline unless you are looking for it directly, know what you are looking for, or have a good reason to think you might have found it. You can't see it. In the end, North Carolina State Attorney Jordan Green told the court that the drug has a very bad effect on the heart and can stop the heart from beating or cause it to fail. It wasn't a mistake. That was a cold-blooded murder that was planned ahead of time. As a flight paramedic since 2013 and someone with a lot of medical training, Joshua Hunsucker would have known a lot about medicines and how they affect people. In court papers, it was made clear that his education and experience would have given him a deep knowledge of different kinds of drugs and how they might affect the body. His job also gave him access to drugs that were not controlled and did not need to be logged or kept track of. He knew what to do, had the tools, and had the chance. The investigation quickly grew. Detectives started talking to Joshua's family, friends, co-workers, and anyone else who might know something. They found out more about the case, which made it even scarier. Something important had happened about 20 miles south of Mount Holly, about 2 weeks before Stacy's death. In August 2018, Lana Sue Clayton, a nurse, was jailed for giving her husband Stephen Clayton eye drops that were poisonous. Clayton admitted that she put eye drops in her husband's water 4 days in a row until he died. In the Charlotte area, the story got a lot of attention from the media. It was talked about by everyone. In court papers, it was said that prosecutors said there were a lot of similarities between that case and Joshua's. Their jobs were both in the medical field. Both of them were murdered at home by their spouses. It was first thought that both deaths were caused by natural reasons. Both used poisoning with tetrahydrosaline. Court papers said that Joshua put eye drops in Stacy's water without her knowing and exposed her to lethal amounts of tetrahydrosaline just days after learning about the case in South Carolina. It was more than that. Detectives talked to Joshua's old co-workers at Atrium Health's MedCenter Air as part of their probe. Before he killed Stacy, Joshua told 2 co-workers that he would use Visine or another eye drop to do it. There were no jokes or pointless comments here. The threats came from a medical worker who knew exactly how it worked. He had told them exactly how he would kill someone if he ever got the chance. After the South Carolina case got a lot of attention from the media, Stacy Robinson Hunsucker died soon after. This murder was planned and thought out. On December 19, 2019, Joshua Lee Hunsucker was caught at home in Mount Holly. He was charged with murder in the first degree. Joshua was also accused of felony insurance theft and getting something by lying about who he was. He was getting benefits worth $250,000, even though he was said to know that he killed his wife and killed her. $2 million was put down as bond for him. He paid the bond and was freed on Christmas Eve 2019, only 5 days after being arrested. He was told not to use the insurance money because of a temporary protection order, but he found the money anyway. That release would turn out to be a terrible, terrible choice. Joshua's behavior got worse and more dangerous while he was out on bail. Later, District Attorney Travis Page said that the suspect would keep doing more dangerous things. Eventually, he would be proven right. Joshua started targeting Stacy's parents, John and Susie Robinson, with constant attacks. He regularly took pictures and videos of them at their granddaughter's sports games. He mailed them packages telling them to drop the murder case. In his car, he followed them and drove by their house several times. He used bad language and body language towards them in the church parking lot where they went. The constant threats were meant to scare them into silence. Later, on February 4, 2023, Joshua faked his own arrest. He told cops that he had been hit in the head several times with a pistol while stopping to change a flat tire. He said his hands were zip-tied and he was injected with something we don't know. He told the cops that his attacker was Stacy's dad, John Robinson. He was trying to make his father-in-law look like he had attacked and kidnapped someone. The Mount Holly police did a full investigation. There was no proof for any part of Joshua's story that they could find. They found out he made up the whole thing to put the blame for his wife's death on the Robinsons. Insane and desperate, the cops were able to see right through it. But Joshua didn't end there. Not long after the fake theft in February 2023, Joshua poisoned his own 11-year-old daughter, who got very sick and had to go to the hospital. The test showed that she had the same chemical in her body as Joshua, along with a tranquilizer that isn't meant for kids. This is the same drug that was found in Joshua's truck. During her treatment, Joshua told the doctors that she thought she looked like she had been given Vecine. The medical staff said this wasn't a likely diagnosis based on her complaints. Authorities think Joshua poisoned his daughter to put the Robinsons on trial and get them out of his daughter's life. A judge found in July 2024 that Joshua had abused his daughter and not taken care of either of his other children. In August 2024, he was caught again for trying to scare witnesses. His bond was revoked in November 2024, and he is still in jail without bail. Bad things happened. Seriously, it was horrible. It was a sign of how far he was willing to go to avoid being responsible. A few weeks before he was arrested for murder, on November 26, 2019, Joshua is said to have set fire to medical equipment on an Atrium Health chopper over Charlotte. He lit a syringe pump on fire aboard the chopper at 12:59 a.m. Due to the fire, there had to be an emergency landing at a car lot on Independence Boulevard. No one got hurt. Joshua was charged with setting a fire illegally. The time was very important. This took place less than a month before he was charged with murder. Police thought Joshua knew he was going to be arrested soon and that the fire was another desperate attempt to cause trouble. Atrium Health released a statement expressing shock, saying they couldn't understand what could have driven him to put people in such grave danger. Joshua had also been put on administrative leave for allegedly bad behavior at work before he was arrested for murder. He lost his job at Atrium Health's MedCenter Air the day after he was arrested in December 2019. He had worked there since 2013. The intended date for Joshua's trial was March 2025, but prosecutors said that because of recent events, it might have to be moved to autumn 2025. After Joshua was arrested for the first time, Stacy's family put out a strong statement through their lawyer that showed how determined and hurt they were, saying, "Your beautiful girls Piper and Willow will have our full support and care." Kelly, who has known Stacy since high school, told her that she did not deserve this to happen to her. She was an excellent mom. She had a good attitude. According to a letter sent by Susie Robinson in April 2020, Stacy was missing a lot of important events. "I'm so sorry you can't be here for your pumpkin's birthday party. I gave both of your girls an extra hug today just for you." The case showed how important it is to look into scams to find murderers. Mike Causey, the commissioner of insurance, thought, "Who would have thought that an investigation into insurance fraud could turn into a full-on murder investigation?" Joshua would have committed the perfect crime without Susie Robinson's mother's sense and the blood sample that was kept safe from organ donation. Stacy Robinson Hunsucker was a loving mother, teacher, and church member. Her favorite things to do were make crafts, visit the beach, watch sports, and photograph her children. Her smile made everyone who knew her feel happy and at ease. Joshua is still in Gaston County Jail without bond as of November 2024. His two girls, who are now about 12 and 14 years old, are no longer in his care. John Robinson and Susie Robinson are still fighting over who gets to keep their grandkids. Justice has not yet been done. But one thing is for sure, Stacy Robinson Hunsucker will not be forgotten. This case shows how dark and unpredictable people can be. Let me know what you think in the comments and subscribe for more true crime content. Now, we uncover the story of a killer who thought he was smarter than everyone else. He planned every move, covered every track, and believed he had committed the perfect crime. Relationships are an important part of life, whether they are personal, family, romantic, or work-related. It's too bad that not all of them turn out to be good. Some can be so bad that they leave mental and physical scars that last a lifetime. It started out as a relationship between a famous doctor and one of her coworkers. From the beginning, it was clear that their relationship was not stable. Over the course of almost 5 years, they broke up and got back together several times. The woman stayed positive and gave the relationship many chances, even though her feelings were all over the place. What happened after she finally got the courage to take charge of her life and tell him she was leaving him for good set off a chain of terrible events. She unknowingly sealed her fate when she stood up for herself and looked for a new start. Before we continue, I'd really love to know where you're watching from. Whether it's a big city or a small town, drop your location in the comments below. It's always interesting to see how far these stories reach. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into true crime, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new case is posted. Now let's get back into it. Dr. Preeti Reddy was born on October 19, 1986, in Pimpri Chinchwad, an Indian city on the Pavnar River. She was the older of Narasimha and Suturatha Reddy's 2 children. Both of her parents were respected and accomplished doctors who ran a successful private practice. The steady and large income her parents made it possible for the family to live well. 4 years younger than Preeti, Nithya was her sister when they were kids. The sisters made a close bond early on and were almost never apart. They always supported each other no matter what, from childhood secrets to hopes and problems. They grew up in a loving home where strong cultural values and a deep love for family were taught. The girls at the Reddy home were given every chance to do well in school because that was important to their parents. Because Narasimha and Sutrata were wealthy, they were always willing to put money into their girls' health and future. The Reddy family did something that changed their lives in 1996. They went to Australia because they thought it would give them more chances and a better future. They bought a big house in a quiet part of Sydney and quickly turned it into their safe place. Both did very well in school at a famous private school. As time went on, Preeti grew into a smart, pretty, and charming young woman. Her personality was outgoing, social, and driven. Her parents were both nurses, and she always wanted to follow in their path by working in healthcare. She naturally liked helping others, and she got real pleasure from making a difference. Preeti made an interesting choice after high school. She made the choice to go back to India and study dentistry at a college in New Delhi. As always, her parents were there for her and trusted her to make the right choices. About 2013 or so, Preeti finished some of her training and went back to Australia to live with her family again. She got her first job at the Hustville Dental and Physiotherapy Centre in Western Sydney. At the same time, she was taking classes at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne to improve her skills. Later, she became a general practitioner at Glenbrook Dental, a center that offered a wide range of wellness services. Peers and patients knew Dr. Preeti Reddy as a rising star in her field because she was very good at what she did and loved it. She was always getting better at what she did and learning new things. In early 2019, right before something that changed her life happened, she was taking advanced courses in dental implants with the goal of one day starting her own clinic in Melbourne. Those dreams would never come true, which is sad. In 2013, while Preeti was still in the overseas trained dentist program, she met Dr. Harshwardhan Nard, who went by the name Harsh, at a training or meeting she was attending. He was Indian like Preeti and came from a line of healthcare workers. Following in the footsteps of his family, Harshwardhan also decided to become a dentist. The two quickly found things they had in common and they became attracted to each other almost right away. After getting to know each other for a few months, they started dating. But there were warning signs about the partnership from the start. There were times when Harshwardhan was protective and moody. He often made fun of Preeti's feelings, questioned her actions, and used subtle tactics to keep her in line. Besides that, he hurt her confidence and made her feel like she wasn't good enough. The first person to notice that something was wrong was Preeti's younger sister Nithya. She knew that Preeti was seeing someone, but her sister never told the family about him. Preeti never had him over to their house and didn't talk about him in any way. In the meantime, Preeti started to act differently. She shut down, felt unsafe, and grew detached. The sparkle in her eyes started to go away. She used to be a happy and sure of herself woman, but now she seemed always on edge, like she was living under a lot of mental stress. The rules of their relationship were being set by Harshwardhan, and Preeti seemed stuck in them. Their parents asked to meet the guy in her life many times, but Preeti would always avoid the subject, change the subject, or say no outright. She clearly didn't like being with Harshwardhan, but she felt mentally tied to him and couldn't break free. The person named Harshwardhan lived in Tamworth and worked at a dentist clinic there. He was dating Preeti, but they never lived together, so their relationship was mostly long distance. He often tried to get her to move in with him and even put pressure on her, but Preeti always said no. She knew in her heart that it wasn't going to end well. It was clear that their relationship wasn't safe. A lot of fights and emotional strains set in, and Preeti always felt like she was under a lot of pressure. She kept secrets about their relationship for a long time. She only told a few close friends and her sister about it after about 6 months. Nithya only saw Harshwardhan a few times before she didn't like him at all. She would remember later that something about his presence made her feel uneasy. By 2014, Preeti and Harshwardhan were seen together in public, so no one had to guess that they were dating. But she never told her parents about him, and she didn't agree to meet his family. Soon after, they broke up, but Preeti didn't tell anyone. This routine of breaking up and getting back together kept going for years. It happened that she wouldn't tell anyone that they were back together or that they had broken up. It was clear that the unstable nature of their relationship, with frequent heated fights followed by equally heated reconciliations, made her feel bad. Preeti was often told by Harshwardhan that she wasn't putting enough effort into their relationship, and he kept telling her to move to Tamworth so they could live together. Although Preeti was firm, she wasn't ready to quit her job or leave her family in Sydney. In the meantime, Harshwardhan had no plans to move for her either. Another breakup happened between Preeti and Harshwardhan in the autumn of 2016. There was no doubt that this time it was over for good. Harshwardhan wasn't ready to let go though. He started making plans for a surprise party for her 30th birthday in October. The surprise did not happen though. Preeti had already planned a party at her parents' house with close friends and co-workers, but she refused to invite her ex-partner. After getting this clear message, Harshwardhan kept trying to get back into her life. He asked for another chance and told her that he had changed and that things would be different. He had never hit anyone, but the constant mental pressure he put on her had left deep marks. Maybe the fact that he wasn't doing him any real harm was what made Preeti decide to give him one last chance, hoping for a fresh start. Things didn't get better, though. It was even harder for Preeti to break up with Harshwardhan because she still cared about him emotionally. He also played with her feelings and made her feel bad about the end of the relationship. She was often the reason he was having trouble and that she was hurting him. At the end of 2018, Preeti tried one last time to save their romance. She soon realized that things were not going to get better no matter how hard she tried or how much she gave up. She broke up for good. That autumn, in November, only a few weeks later, she met a young doctor from Melbourne. They felt a genuine link right away. Kind, caring, and responsive, this new man was everything Harshwardhan wasn't. Preeti wasn't shy about her relationship for the first time in years. She happily told her family and friends about him. She seemed truly joyful and full of hope for the future. It became real to her that she could get married and start a family. She even thought about moving to Melbourne to be near him. When she started looking for work in the area, well-known dentistry clinics responded right away. After getting several offers, she chose a center where she planned to move after her duties in Sydney were over. For the first time in years, She told her friends in December that she had never felt this good and that she finally felt free of the past. Her friends and family were thrilled to see how happy she was, but they were only happy for a short time. The news of Preeti's new relationship reached Harshvardhan in January. He started to contact her again by calling, texting, and trying to set up a meeting because he was angry and jealous. Although Preeti was sure of what she wanted to do, she didn't pay attention to anything he did. By February, Harshvardhan told his brother on the phone that he couldn't accept what he saw as deception. He kept talking about Preeti as if she still belonged to him, and he thought that her new relationship was hurtful to him. He told her that he wouldn't let her marry someone else and even gave the impression that he was ready to do something very bad. It seemed like empty, angry threats made out of anger and helplessness at the time. Sydney held a 2-day international dental meeting starting on March 1, 2019, where the latest dental techniques were shown. People who went included Dr. Preeti Reddy and Dr. Harshvardhan Nard, who used to be her boyfriend. At the Urban Hotel, Preeti shared a room with 2 close friends and co-workers. According to Harshvardhan's reservation, the Swiss hotel is only a few blocks away. Post the first day, Preeti told her friends that she was feeling uncomfortable. Harshvardhan was looking at her closely the whole time at the meeting, waiting for a chance to talk to her. His behavior was making her feel bad because it seemed like he wouldn't stop. The girls chose to relax that night at a bar. But even then, Preeti looked tense because she was always looking over her shoulder. It got even worse on the second day. She was followed by Harshvardhan, who insisted they talk and meet. Her friends begged her not to give up, but Preeti felt torn and angry. Even though they warned her not to, Preeti reluctantly decided to talk to Harshvardhan after the conference was over. They needed to make up, and she hoped he would finally let her move on. She had carefully practiced what she was going to say, hoping that he would hear her, stop the fight, and let her move on with her life. Around 6:30 in the evening, on March 2nd, a gray Volkswagen Golf Preeti was seen leaving the Urban Hotel's underground garage on security video. Preeti was driving, and Harshvardhan was sitting next to her. A little over an hour later, they went to Ravi's Cumin restaurant in Crow's Nest together. A lot of people, including witnesses, other guests, and restaurant staff, said later that they could feel the stress at their table. Preeti looked tense and eager to leave, while Harshvardhan repeatedly tried to grab her hand and spoke over her. The waiter who was serving them remembered that Preeti had said she was going to move to Melbourne and that she was in love with someone else. She also asked Harshvardhan to let her go, but he didn't seem to notice. As an alternative, he kept talking about getting married and said he would move to Sydney just to be close to her. The couple left the diner around 10:30 p.m. and walked back to their car, but they didn't get in. They fought for more than an hour right there. When Harshvardhan tried to hug her, Preeti turned away from him. At about midnight, they finally got in their car and drove off. After driving through the city for 15 minutes more, they pulled into a mall parking lot. Nobody got out of the car. On the building's wall, surveillance cameras caught them having a heated fight. Harshvardhan was making wild gestures, and Preeti was clearly crying. Around 2:00 a.m., Preeti got out of the car and went into a mall location with a 24-hour fast food place. She bought a water bottle and hung out near the door, waiting for Harshvardhan to leave, although he was still in the car when she returned. Onwards to the Swiss hotel, where Harshvardhan had a room. It was quiet as he led Preeti past the front desk and into his room around 3 a.m. That was the last time she left. At around 10 a.m. on March 3rd, Preeti called her younger sister to say she'd be home in a few hours. In 5 minutes, she called Harshvardhan and told him she loved him and that they were going to be together soon. The last time anyone heard from Preeti was that day. The family of Preeti thought she would be home by lunchtime, but she never showed up. The fact that her phone was off was very strange. At 3:00 p.m., people began to feel scared. The always connected Preeti would let someone know if she was going to be late. Her family started calling her friends and coworkers right away to see where she was. Fear turned into worry as the day went on with no sign of her. They then found out that she had been seen at the conference with her ex-boyfriend, Harshvardhan, who was allegedly trying to get back together with her and wouldn't leave her alone. Nithya called Harshvardhan, but he either didn't answer or said no, even though his phone was still on. It was clear to the police that night, March 3rd, that her family thought her ex-boyfriend might be involved when they made a missing person report. They also started their own search and called everyone who might have seen or talked to Preeti. Also, Nithya made a number of posts on social media where she shared new pictures and asked people for any information that might help her find her sister. The post reached almost 2,000 people in 24 hours, including some of Preeti's past patients. Many people offered to help look for her or spread the word, but no one knew for sure where she was. Only Harshvardhan could lead them, but he still wasn't answering the phone. In the afternoon of March 4th, Harshvardhan finally picked up one of Nithya's calls. His answer was surprisingly cool. Apparently, Preeti was an adult and would be there soon. He said they had seen each other at the meeting, but only talked for a short time before they parted ways. Strangely, Harshvardhan called Nithya back an hour later. This time, he was very angry. He yelled at her and asked her why she was calling his family, friends, and co-workers to ask about Preeti. Without any proof, he said that the Reddy family was unfairly blaming him and hurting his image. His behavior sent up big red flags. He didn't seem to care that Preeti had disappeared all of a sudden or that she might be in danger. Plus, the fact that people were looking for her and paying attention to him made him feel even worse. Since Preeti had agreed to meet Harshvardhan for dinner, he was probably the last person to see her. His family demanded that he talk to the police and give a full account before he was officially called in. Harshvardhan went to Sydney later that day and walked into the police station saying he wanted to help and was ready to share what he knew. The police noticed right away that he was acting strangely. He was shaking, sweating, walking, and making hand gestures without controlling himself. He told them that he saw Preeti at the meeting and at dinner on March 2nd. He said they had their last talk, ended their relationship, and then he called her a taxi. According to him, that was the last time he saw her. But there were holes in his story. He got confused, contradicted himself, and had a hard time keeping the same version of the schedule when he was asked to talk about what happened again. The cops had no solid reason to hold him, even though he was acting strangely, so they let him go. Before they left, though, a detective said that they were looking at surveillance tape that might show where Preeti and Harshvardhan were going. The goal that night was to put together the plan in great detail. The thing he said seemed to rattle him. After only a few hours, he went back to the station and changed his story. He said he wasn't the one who called the cab for Preeti. They took her own Volkswagen Golf to the restaurant, which she had driven herself. He said he was just nervous and didn't think those things would matter when asked why he had lied at first. Later that March 4th, news came out about a bad car accident on the New England highway. At high speed, a BMW crossed into oncoming traffic and hit a truck head-on. Police said the driver was dead at the spot. The person who died was named Dr. Harshvardhan Nard. But how did he get into such a terrible accident on a road that wasn't very busy? The surveillance video showed that Harshvardhan had quickly sped up and driven into the path of the truck on purpose. The case looked like a suicide, and soon after, more evidence backed up that idea. When the detective talked about surveillance video, it was clear that it had really scared him. Harshvardhan probably knew that police would soon be able to piece together where he and Preeti had gone that night, who had seen them, and how she got to his hotel room with him and never came out. The next day, after Harshvardhan died, Preeti's stolen Volkswagen Golf was found abandoned in a quiet suburban area on the edge of Sydney. Her body was stuffed into a big blue bag inside the trunk and was no longer alive. Later, forensic detectives confirmed that she had a serious head injury and 11 stab wounds, mostly in her neck and back. 2 days later, after putting together security video and interviews with witnesses, police were able to figure out what had happened. Preeti decided to have dinner with Harshvardhan on March 2nd. She probably did this to end their relationship and move on with her life. A waiter heard bits and pieces of their talk and remembered that Preeti seemed upset and scared. They drove for hours after dinner before they got to the hotel where Harshvardhan was staying. He may have used her emotions against her, which he had done before, to make her feel bad. Maybe she went along with the plan to make things better, say what she meant, and then move on. Detectives thought that the horrible act must have happened in the room because she was never seen leaving the hotel. There were signs of blood in the bathroom, even though it had been cleaned so well that the housekeepers hadn't seen anything strange. Preeti may have gone into the toilet to call her new partner. Hearing the call may have been too much for Harshwarden. As soon as she hung up the phone, he reportedly attacked her from behind, hitting her on the head and cutting her several times with something sharp. Harshwarden quietly cleaned up after the act, went to the front desk and asked to stay another night. He then ate breakfast at the hotel restaurant and then went shopping in the area. He bought a big blue suitcase and a bunch of different kinds of cleaning materials. Then he went back to his hotel room. His checkout time was around 5 p.m. A worker noticed that the man's suitcase seemed especially heavy when he was asked if he needed help with it. Without much thought, Harshwarden said that he had bought too many gifts for his family. Putting everything in Preethi's Volkswagen Golf, he drove to the edge of the city and left the car. In a quiet neighborhood corner, hoping no one would notice for a while, Harshwarden got his BMW from the yard and started driving back to his home in Tamworth after everything that had happened. At some point along the way, he stopped at a petrol station to get petrol and coffee. Several people later said they saw him there. They remembered that his phone kept ringing over and over, but he either cut the calls off or didn't pay attention to them at all. Later, it was proven that those calls came from Nithya, who was desperately trying to get in touch with him while looking for her sister. Harshwarden probably thought he had committed the perfect crime, covering his tracks so well that police would not be able to connect him to anything. He was sure that they would not be able to prove it, even if they did. What he hadn't thought about was that almost every place he and Preeti had gone that day had surveillance cams. Those tapes would soon show what was really going on. Harshwarden knew he had made a mistake when he thought about how quickly the police would have solid proof of his participation. He decided not to wait for an arrest or trial. Not waiting for justice to be done, he ended his own life. Harshwarden's family refused to think that he could have done something so horrible, even though the evidence kept growing. It was hard for them to believe that he could have killed someone so brutally and purposefully. After losing their beloved daughter and sister, the Reddy family did something. They started a plan to open Australia's first centre to help women who have been victims of domestic violence. Along with mental support, the centre would offer safe housing, legal advice, and other help to people who are trying to get away from abuse or controlling relationships. Not only did the Reddy family give money to the project, they also spoke out about it. They made sure that people in need knew there was a place to turn to for safety and healing by getting the word out and using Oluwaseun Adebayo's journey began far from the manicured lawns of Millbrook in the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria. Born in 1990 to a family struggling to make ends meet, Oluwaseun, or Sean, as he would later be known, learned early that survival often meant bending the rules. His father, a street vendor, and his mother, a seamstress, instilled in him a hunger for a better life, one that seemed perpetually out of reach in the crowded streets of Lagos. By his early 20s, Sean had exhausted every legal avenue to leave Nigeria. His applications for student visas were repeatedly denied, and work permits seemed an impossible dream. It was during this time of frustration that Sean fell in with a group of young men who specialized in what they euphemistically called alternative immigration strategies. Sean's first attempt in 2018 ended in failure when his tourist visa application was denied. Undeterred, he spent the next 2 years building a more convincing cover story. He created a fake business, fabricated bank statements, and even paid for a sham sponsor in the U.S. In 2020, his persistence paid off. He was granted a 6-month tourist visa. Arriving in New York with nothing but a small suitcase and big dreams, Sean quickly realized that his fantasy of America clashed harshly with reality. The city was unforgiving, the people cold, and opportunities for an illegal immigrant were scarce. He bounced from one menial job to another, always looking over his shoulder, fearful of deportation. It was during this time that Sean refined his strategy. He observed that older, lonely women were often more susceptible to his charms and less likely to scrutinize his background too closely. He practiced his seduction techniques in bars and community centers, each encounter a rehearsal for the performance of a lifetime. With a mixture of desperation and determination, Sean boarded a bus to California in the summer of 2022. He arrived in Millbrook with a singular goal: to find a woman he could marry quickly, secure his green card, and then discard. Little did he know that in pursuing this cold-hearted plan, he would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. Gertrude Whittaker was born Gertrude Ellington in 1962, in the very town of Millbrook, where she would spend most of her life. The only child of a high school teacher and a nurse, Gertrude grew up surrounded by books and a love for learning. Her childhood was marked by quiet afternoons in the town library, where she would lose herself in worlds far beyond the boundaries of her small town. In 2020, Gertrude retired from her position as head librarian. While she looked forward to having more time for her hobbies, gardening, birdwatching, and of course reading, she soon found retirement to be lonelier than she had anticipated. Her days, once filled with the bustle of the library and the company of coworkers and patrons, now stretched before her in quiet solitude. Gertrude's friends and family encouraged her to travel, to take classes, to embrace this new chapter of her life. But for Gertrude, the thought of venturing out alone into the world was daunting. She had spent her life in the company of books and the safety of routine. Now, at 60, she yearned for companionship, but feared she had missed her chance at finding love again. Little did Gertrude know that fate, or perhaps misfortune, was about to introduce her to a man who would change the course of her life. As the autumn of 2022 approached, Gertrude Whittaker was a woman poised between contentment and longing, unaware that she was about to become entangled in a web of deceit that would ultimately lead to her demise. The crisp air of early September 2022 brought with it a sense of anticipation in Millbrook. The annual Harvest Festival was in full swing, transforming the town square into a bustling marketplace of local produce, crafts, and community spirit. It was here, amidst the cheerful chaos of the festival, that Gertrude Whittaker and Sean Adebayo's paths would fatefully cross. Gertrude, volunteering at the Friends of the Library booth, was in her element. Surrounded by donated books and chatting with old acquaintances, she felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since her retirement. Her hair caught the afternoon sun as she leaned over to arrange a display of mystery novels. Sean, having arrived in Millbrook just days earlier, was strategically positioning himself to meet potential targets. He wandered through the festival, his eyes scanning the crowd, looking for women who fit his criteria: older, seemingly well-off, and most importantly, alone. As Sean approached the book booth, his gaze fell upon Gertrude. He noted her tasteful jewelry and well-kept appearance, indicators of financial stability. More importantly, he saw the flash of loneliness in her eyes as she watched couples and families enjoying the festival together. Seizing the moment, Sean struck up a conversation, feigning interest in American literature. Gertrude, delighted to share her knowledge, was immediately drawn to the young man's apparent enthusiasm and charming accent. She found herself explaining the nuances of Hemingway and Fitzgerald to an attentive listener, something she hadn't done since her library days. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on books, travel, and life in Millbrook. Sean carefully wove in details of his fabricated background, a successful businessman exploring small-town America while showing genuine interest in Gertrude's life and experiences. As the afternoon wore on, Gertrude felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. Sean's attention made her feel seen, appreciated in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. When he asked if she might show him around town sometime, Gertrude surprised herself by eagerly agreeing. Little did Gertrude know that this chance encounter, which felt like the beginning of a sweet autumn romance, was in fact the first move in Sean's calculated game of deception. As they parted ways, promising to meet again soon, the wheels of tragedy were already in motion. In the weeks following their meeting at the Harvest Festival, Sean orchestrated a whirlwind romance that left Gertrude breathless and the town of Millbrook buzzing with gossip. He approached the courtship with the precision of a master strategist, each move carefully planned to win Gertrude's heart and the community's approval. Their first date was a picnic in Millbrook Park, where Sean arrived with a basket filled with Gertrude's favorite foods, information he had gleaned from their initial conversation. He listened intently as Gertrude shared stories of her life, mentally noting details he could use to deepen their connection. When he spoke of his own life, he painted a picture of a successful, cultured man who had everything but love. Sean's charm offensive extended beyond Gertrude. He made a point of befriending the locals, volunteering at community events, and even attending services at Gertrude's church. His natural charisma and seemingly genuine interest in small-town life quickly endeared him to many in Millbrook. For Gertrude, each day brought a new surprise. Sean would leave flowers on her doorstep, send handwritten notes quoting her favorite poets, and plan thoughtful outings that catered to her interests. He took her to a nearby vineyard for wine tasting, knowing her fondness for a good Merlot. He arranged a private tour of a historical library in the next town, combining their shared love of books with a romantic day trip. As autumn progressed, so did their relationship. Gertrude found herself opening up, sharing hopes and dreams she had long since buried. Sean played the part of the attentive listener, the supportive partner who encouraged her to embrace life fully. He spoke of a future together, of adventures they could share, reigniting a sense of possibility in Gertrude's heart. However, not everyone in Millbrook was swept up in the romance. Gertrude's closest friend, Beatrice Holloway, watched the relationship unfold with growing concern. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Sean, that his devotion to Gertrude seemed too perfect, too calculated. Gertrude's nephew, Daniel, who lived in San Francisco, also expressed reservations when he heard about the relationship during their weekly phone calls. The age difference and the speed at which the relationship was progressing raised red flags for him. But Gertrude, caught up in the intoxicating rush of new love, brushed off their concerns. She felt rejuvenated, desirable, and more alive than she had in years. When Sean proposed after just 2 months of dating, presenting her with a stunning diamond ring, Gertrude said yes without hesitation. As news of their engagement spread through Millbrook, opinions were divided. Some celebrated the autumn-spring romance, while others whispered their doubts. Unbeknownst to all, the stage was being set for a confrontation that would shatter the idyllic facade of their whirlwind courtship. While Sean Adebayo played the role of devoted fiancé to perfection in public, behind closed doors, he led a double life fraught with deception and calculated moves. His small rented room on the outskirts of Millbrook became the command center for his elaborate scheme. Late at night, after charming dinners with Gertrude or community events, Sean would return to his room and connect with his co-conspirators back in Nigeria. Using encrypted messaging apps and voice-altered video calls, he would report on his progress and seek advice on navigating the complexities of U.S. immigration law. His main contact was Adebayo Okonkwo, the mastermind behind the operation who had helped Sean and others like him orchestrate similar schemes across America. Okonkwo, a former lawyer with a sharp mind for exploiting legal loopholes, provided Sean with forged documents, coached him on answering potential questions from immigration officials, and constantly reminded him of the stakes involved. Sean's room was a testament to his duplicity. One drawer contained love letters and mementos from his time with Gertrude, while another held fake passports, falsified bank statements, and a burner phone used solely for communicating with his Nigerian contacts. He meticulously documented every interaction with Gertrude and influential people in Millbrook, creating a paper trail to support his fabricated identity. The pressure of maintaining his facade occasionally showed cracks in Sean's carefully constructed persona. There were moments when Gertrude's genuine affection caused pangs of guilt, quickly suppressed by reminders of his ultimate goal. He had come too far, risked too much, to let emotions derail his plans now. Sean's double life led to several close calls that threatened to unravel everything. Once, while on a date with Gertrude at a local restaurant, he spotted a man he recognized from his time in New York, another Nigerian involved in similar schemes. Sean quickly steered Gertrude to another section of the restaurant, making up an excuse about a draft, his heart pounding as he prayed the man hadn't noticed him. Another time, Gertrude dropped by his room unannounced, bearing homemade cookies. Sean had barely managed to hide his incriminating documents before letting her in, forcing a smile as cold sweat beaded on his forehead. Perhaps the closest call came during a dinner with Gertrude's nephew, Daniel, who had come to visit from San Francisco. Daniel works in tech and analytics, asked pointed questions about Sean's background and business dealings. Sean deflected with practiced ease, but the encounter left him shaken. He spent that night on a lengthy call with Okonkwo, strategizing how to handle similar situations in the future. As the wedding date approached, Sean's communications with his Nigerian contacts intensified. They discussed the next steps, how to secure the green card, the optimal time to initiate divorce proceedings, and strategies for moving on to the next target. Sean assured them that everything was proceeding according to plan, that Gertrude suspected nothing. But even as he confidently laid out his strategy to Okonkwo and the others, a small voice in the back of Sean's mind whispered doubts. He had underestimated the complexity of human emotions, both Gertrude's and, unexpectedly, his own. As he ended the call and stared at his reflection in the darkened window, Sean wondered if he was truly prepared for the final act of his deception. As October gave way to November, the town of Millbrook buzzed with excitement over the upcoming nuptials of Gertrude Whitaker and Sean Adebayo. The couple had decided on a quick wedding, citing their desire to start their new life together as soon as possible. This haste, while raising eyebrows among some, was attributed to the passion of their whirlwind romance. Gertrude threw herself into the wedding preparations with an enthusiasm that surprised even her closest friends. She seemed to have a new lease on life, her eyes sparkling with joy as she pored over bridal magazines and flitted from one appointment to another. She chose an elegant, age-appropriate gown in soft ivory and spent hours at the local florist selecting the perfect autumn-themed bouquet. Sean, for his part, played the role of the eager groom-to-be with Oscar-worthy precision. He accompanied Gertrude to cake tastings, offered opinions on color schemes, and charmed the various vendors with his wit and seeming devotion to his bride. Privately, however, each decision was calculated to speed up the process and minimize scrutiny. The couple decided to hold the ceremony at Millbrook's historic Elm Street Chapel, with a reception to follow at the town's quaint Rosewood Inn. Gertrude was touched when Sean suggested they make a donation to the local library in lieu of a gift registry, not realizing this was Sean's way of further ingratiating himself with the community. As the wedding day drew nearer, Gertrude's excitement was tinged with moments of anxiety. She confided in her friend Beatrice about fleeting doubts. Was she being foolish to marry so quickly? Was the age difference too great? But each time she would shake off these concerns, choosing to focus on the happiness Sean had brought into her life. Sean, meanwhile, felt the pressure mounting. He made secret phone calls to Okonkwo, finalizing details of what would happen after the wedding. He began to prepare for the next phase, presenting himself as the devoted husband to immigration authorities. Every night, he rehearsed his answers to potential questions, determined not to let anything slip. Just days before the wedding, Gertrude's nephew Daniel arrived in town. His presence made Sean noticeably tense, though he hid it well beneath his usual charm. Daniel's probing questions and skeptical glances were a constant reminder of the precariousness of Sean's position. As the final arrangements fell into place, a sense of inevitability settled over Millbrook. The stage was set for a joyous union, but fate, and Sean's web of lies, had other plans. The countdown to the wedding became a ticking time bomb, its detonation set to shatter the autumn calm of this unsuspecting town. The day before the wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn morning that seemed to promise new beginnings. Gertrude woke early, her mind already racing with last-minute details and excited anticipation. As she went about her morning routine, she hummed softly to herself, pausing occasionally to admire her engagement ring in the soft morning light. It was during one of these moments, as she was straightening up her bedroom, that fate intervened. Gertrude noticed Sean's jacket draped over a chair. He had left it behind the previous evening after a final meeting with the wedding planner. Always the neat organizer, she picked it up to hang it properly. As she lifted the jacket, a small, folded piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Gertrude bent to retrieve it, assuming it was a receipt or perhaps a note related to the wedding. But as her eyes scanned the unfolded paper, her world tilted on its axis. The document was a printed email, its contents a cryptic mix of instructions and codes. Phrases like "target secured" and "proceed with extraction post-ceremony" jumped out at her. There were mentions of money transfers, fake documents, and most disturbingly, a timeline for dissolving the union. Gertrude's hands trembled as she read and reread the email. Her mind, sharp from years of analyzing literature, quickly began to piece together the horrifying truth. The man she thought she knew, the man she was set to marry in less than 24 hours, was not who he claimed to be. In a daze, Gertrude made her way to her home office. With shaking fingers, she typed Sean's name into a search engine, this time digging deeper than she ever had before. She found nothing about his supposed business successes, no trace of the life he had described to her. Instead, she uncovered warnings about marriage fraud schemes targeting older women in small towns. As the morning wore on, Gertrude's shock gave way to a myriad of emotions: betrayal, anger, humiliation, and a deep, aching sadness. She thought of all the moments they had shared, the dreams they had discussed, now tainted by the poison of deception. She considered calling Beatrice or her nephew Daniel, but pride held her back. How could she admit that they had been right to be suspicious? How could she face the pity and the "I told you so" comments that would surely follow? As the grandfather clock in her living room chimed noon, Gertrude made a decision. She would confront Sean herself. She needed to hear the truth from his lips, to understand why he had targeted her, to know if any part of their relationship had been real. With a resolve born of anger and heartbreak, Gertrude composed herself and picked up her phone. Her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. She left a message asking Sean to come over immediately. She said she had an urgent question about the wedding, knowing he wouldn't suspect the storm that was about to break. As she waited for Sean to arrive, Gertrude stood by her living room window, watching the autumn leaves dance in the breeze. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, about to plunge into an unknown abyss. Little did she know that this confrontation would lead to consequences far more tragic than a broken heart and shattered dreams. The sound of tires on gravel announced Sean's arrival. Gertrude watched from the window as he bounded up the front steps, a bouquet of her favorite flowers in hand. His smile, once charming, now seemed sinister to her newly opened eyes. She steeled herself for the confrontation to come. Sean arrived home bearing a surprise, calling out cheerfully for Gertrude. When she emerged from the living room, her carefully controlled expression made his smile fade. He asked about her urgent phone call, but instead of answering, she questioned his true identity. Confused, Sean tried to reassure her, but Gertrude confronted him with a damning email she discovered. The color drained from his face as she exposed his deception. He had targeted her for a green card marriage, reporting his progress to accomplices. Sean's charm gave way to desperate pleading. He claimed that while it had started as a scheme, his feelings had become genuine. Gertrude responded with bitter laughter, asking if his love had been real while he planned to divorce her after getting his green card. His desperation turned to anger as he defended his actions, speaking of survival and having nothing. But Gertrude, now crying, rejected his justifications. When she ordered him to leave, panic crept into his voice. He grabbed her arm, begging her to reconsider, while she struggled to pull away, her fear mounting alongside her anger. Their struggle escalated, both driven by desperation. Gertrude to free herself from Sean's grasp and the web of lies he had spun. Sean to salvage his plan and his chance at a new life. In the heat of the moment, neither was fully aware of how close they had come to the top of the stairs. It happened in an instant. Gertrude wrenched her arm free with unexpected force. Sean, caught off balance, instinctively reached out to steady himself. His hand connected with Gertrude's shoulder, a reflexive push that under normal circumstances would have been harmless. But they were not in normal circumstances. Gertrude, already off balance from the struggle, felt herself falling backwards. Time seemed to slow as she teetered at the top of the stairs, her eyes locking with Sean's in a moment of shared horror before gravity took hold. The sound of Gertrude's body tumbling down the stairs echoed through the house, followed by a sickening silence that marked the devastating turn their confrontation had taken. After Gertrude fell down the stairs, Sean stood paralyzed at the top, the silence broken only by his pounding heart. When she weakly called out that she couldn't move, he rushed to her side. She lay crumpled on the floor, her hair spread around her head, her eyes filled with pain as she begged him to call an ambulance. Though Sean apologized frantically, claiming it was an accident, he hesitated when pulling out his phone. His mind raced with the consequences. Calling for help would destroy his chances at a new life and likely lead to his deportation. As Gertrude's breathing grew more labored, she pleaded with increasing desperation. But Sean had made his terrible choice. Tears streamed down his face as he apologized one final time, unable to bring himself to make the call. Betrayal flooded Gertrude's eyes as she realized he meant to let her die. Sean backed away, his survival instinct overriding any genuine feelings he'd developed. He moved methodically through the house, erasing traces of his presence while Gertrude's breathing grew weaker. When her voice, now just a whisper, called out one last time, Sean had already committed to his path. With a final glance at the woman he'd planned to marry, he slipped quietly out of the house. Outside, the autumn day continued undisturbed. Birds chirped, leaves rustled in the breeze, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded within the house. Sean walked to his car, his movements mechanical, his mind already formulating his next move. As he drove away from Gertrude's house for the last time, Sean glanced in his rearview mirror. The image of Gertrude, lying broken at the bottom of the stairs, was seared into his memory. In that moment, he realized that in his desperate pursuit of a better life, he had lost something fundamental to his humanity. The quiet streets of Millbrook slipped by as Sean drove, the picturesque town now a backdrop to a tragedy of his own making. Behind him, in the house that had almost become his home, Gertrude Whittaker took her final breaths, alone and betrayed by the man she had dared to love. The discovery of Gertrude Whittaker's body sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Millbrook. It was Beatrice Holloway, concerned when Gertrude didn't answer her calls on the morning of what should have been her wedding day, who found her friend's lifeless form at the bottom of the stairs. The police arrived quickly, transforming the quaint house into a crime scene. Detective Liam Reeves, a veteran of the Millbrook Police Department, took charge of the investigation. Initial observations suggested an accidental fall, but something about the scene didn't sit right with Reeves. As news of Gertrude's death spread, so did questions about the whereabouts of her fiancé, Sean Adebayo. His conspicuous absence raised suspicions, turning him from grieving partner to prime suspect in a matter of hours. The investigation uncovered a trail of inconsistencies in Sean's background. His business contacts proved non-existent. His past addresses led nowhere. It became clear that Sean Adebayo was not who he had claimed to be. Gertrude's nephew, Daniel, proved to be a valuable asset to the investigation. His tech expertise helped uncover digital breadcrumbs that Sean had failed to erase completely. Emails, money transfers, and encrypted messages began to paint a picture of a complex fraud operation with international connections. After 2 years on the run, Sean Adebayo was finally apprehended in March 2024 at a small airport in Mexico, attempting to board a flight to Colombia using forged documents. Following his extradition to California, he faced trial for the death of Gertrude Whittaker. In a packed courtroom in Sacramento, with Gertrude's nephew Daniel and her friend Beatrice in attendance, Judge Marion Reeves sentenced Adebayo to 25 years to life for second-degree murder, with additional charges for fraud and identity theft. As he was led away in handcuffs, the former charmer's confident facade had crumbled completely, leaving only the hollow shell of a man whose desperate gambit for a better life had destroyed both his dreams and an innocent woman's life. At the center of this harrowing tale were Ryan and Camilla Watson, a couple whose outward appearance of marital bliss masked a relationship teetering on the brink of collapse. Ryan, a 35-year-old insurance salesman with a receding hairline and a desperate gleam in his eyes, had watched helplessly as the passion in his marriage flickered and died over the course of 7 increasingly bitter years. Camilla, 32, taught 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary. With her warm smile and patient demeanor, she was beloved by her students and respected by their parents. But behind closed doors, her bright exterior dimmed, suffocated by the weight of a loveless marriage. Born in 1983 to working-class parents in Millbrook, Ryan had always felt the sting of being overlooked. The middle child of three, he watched as his older brother excelled in sports, and his younger sister charmed everyone with her vivacity. Ryan, by contrast, was unremarkable. Average in looks, average in grades, average in almost every way. This sense of mediocrity followed him into adulthood. After barely scraping through community college with a business degree, Ryan found himself selling insurance policies to reluctant customers. He wasn't particularly good at it, but he wasn't bad enough to be fired. Year after year, he watched younger colleagues surpass him, earning promotions and bonuses while he remained stagnant. Camilla's story couldn't have been more different. The only daughter of a local doctor and a high school English teacher, she grew up in a home filled with books, intellectual discussions, and high expectations. Naturally bright and hardworking, Camilla breezed through school, graduating at the top of her class before heading off to a prestigious state university to study education. It was during her senior year of college that Camilla met Ryan at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was home for the summer and he was instantly smitten by her easy laugh and kind eyes. For Camilla, Ryan represented a break from the high-achieving, often pretentious men she dated in college. His self-deprecating humor and apparent lack of ambition felt refreshingly genuine. Their whirlwind romance bloomed over that summer, and by the time Camilla returned to school in the fall, they were deeply in love. They married the following year in a modest ceremony at Camilla's parents' backyard. For a while, it seemed like a fairy tale. Ryan was attentive and loving, while Camilla's optimism and encouragement seemed to buoy his self-esteem. But as the years wore on, the cracks began to show. Ryan's initial contentment with his lot in life calcified into a stubborn refusal to strive for more. Camilla, who had once found his lack of ambition charming, grew increasingly frustrated. She longed for intellectual stimulation, for travel, for the kind of life she'd always imagined for herself. Their arguments, at first infrequent, became a regular occurrence. Camilla would plead with Ryan to go back to school, to look for a better job, to show some initiative. Ryan, feeling attacked and inadequate, would lash out, accusing her of being unsatisfied with who he was. By their 7th anniversary, the Watsons were little more than roommates. They slept in separate bedrooms, ate meals in silence, and communicated mainly through terse notes left on the kitchen counter. Camilla threw herself into her work, staying late at school and volunteering for every committee and extracurricular activity available. Ryan, meanwhile, retreated into a world of online gaming and late-night TV, nursing his wounded pride with beer and resentment. It was in this atmosphere of mutual disappointment and unspoken recriminations that Ryan's desperate plan began to take shape. The seed of Ryan's scheme was planted on a rainy Tuesday evening in late September. He had stopped at O'Malley's, a dingy bar on the outskirts of town, to avoid going home to the cold silence of his house. As he nursed his third beer, a man slid onto the stool next to him. Lyle Dawson was the kind of person most Millbrook residents crossed the street to avoid. With his unkempt beard, tattooed arms, and perpetually bloodshot eyes, he looked every inch the small-time criminal he was. Lyle had done stints in county jail for petty theft and drug possession, and was rumored to be involved in various shady enterprises. As the night wore on, Lyle's tongue loosened, and he began to share stories of his recent exploits and close calls with the authorities. His tales were filled with daring schemes and narrow escapes, each more outlandish than the last. Ryan, several drinks into the evening and wallowing in self-pity, found himself reciprocating by confiding in Lyle about the problems in his marriage. In his inebriated state, Ryan expressed a desire to do something significant, something that would make his wife take notice of him again. He likened his aspirations to the heroic deeds of movie protagonists who rescue damsels in distress and emerge as heroes. Lyle's interest was piqued by Ryan's vulnerable state and desperate wish. Seizing the opportunity, he leaned in conspiratorially and suggested that he might be able to help Ryan achieve his goal of becoming a hero, for a price, of course. His words carried a hint of danger and excitement, tempting Ryan with the promise of reclaiming his wife's attention through some unspecified, potentially illicit means. And so, over the next hour, fueled by alcohol and desperation, a plan was hatched. Lyle would kidnap Camilla, holding her for a short time in an abandoned farmhouse outside of town. Ryan would then swoop in to rescue her, proving his worth and reigniting the spark in their marriage. As the night wore on, the plan grew more elaborate. They discussed the timing, the location, even the ransom note Lyle would leave. Ryan, caught up in the excitement, barely flinched when Lyle named his price. $5,000 up front, another $5,000 after the rescue. It wasn't until Ryan woke up the next morning, head pounding and mouth dry, that the full weight of what he'd agreed to hit him. For a moment he considered backing out, but then he imagined Camilla looking at him with admiration again, falling into his arms in gratitude and relief. The thought was intoxicating. Over the next few weeks, Ryan threw himself into the preparations. He withdrew money from his meager savings, scouted locations, and met with Lyle several times to refine the details. With each passing day, his excitement grew. Soon he thought everything would change. Soon he would be a hero. As the date of the planned kidnapping approached, Ryan found himself caught between feverish anticipation and gnawing doubt. He had always been a cautious man, more likely to overthink a decision than to act impulsively. Now he found himself lying awake at night, running through every possible scenario in his mind. What if Camilla saw through the ruse? What if the police got involved before he could stage the rescue? What if Lyle decided to double-cross him? These thoughts chased each other through his head, leaving him exhausted and on edge. Despite his misgivings, Ryan pressed on with the preparations. He created a detailed schedule, accounting for Camilla's routines and the optimal time for the abduction. He even went so far as to plant a hidden GPS tracker in Camilla's car, ostensibly to aid in the rescue, but really to ensure Lyle didn't try to pull any last-minute changes. Camilla, oblivious to the scheme brewing around her, continued her daily life. If she noticed Ryan's odd behavior, his sudden attentiveness, the furtive phone calls, the poorly concealed nervousness, she gave no sign. Their interactions remained cool and distant. Further cementing Ryan's resolve, 2 days before the planned event, Ryan met Lyle for a final review of the plan. They sat in Lyle's beat-up pickup truck in the parking lot of a defunct strip mall, going over the details one last time. As their conversation progressed, Ryan began to notice a disconcerting intensity in Lyle's demeanor. There was an unsettling eagerness in his eyes, an overinvestment in the scheme that made Ryan uneasy. When Ryan cautiously suggested scaling back some of the more extreme aspects of the plan, Lyle reacted with irritation. Lyle insisted on the necessity of maintaining the illusion of genuine danger. He argued that for the plan to be effective, Ryan's wife needed to believe she was truly at risk. His words carried a threatening undertone that made Ryan increasingly uncomfortable. Despite his growing reservations, Ryan found himself nodding in reluctant agreement. He felt trapped by the momentum of their scheme, unable to extricate himself from the situation he had helped create. As he watched Lyle's vehicle disappear into the night, Ryan was struck by a foreboding sense that he had set in motion events beyond his control, leaving him to grapple with the potential consequences of their ill-conceived plan. October 15th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that usually filled Ryan with a sense of contentment. Today, however, he felt nothing but a turning mix of anxiety and anticipation. He lay in bed, listening to the sounds of Camilla getting ready for work, rehearsing his part in the day's events one last time. At 7:30 a.m., right on schedule, he heard the front door close and Camilla's car start up. Ryan waited a few minutes, then got up and dressed quickly. He had taken the day off work, telling his boss he had a stomach bug. Now he settled in to wait for Lyle's call. Across town, Camilla arrived at Millbrook Elementary, greeting her colleagues with her usual warm smile. If anyone had been paying close attention, they might have noticed the slight strain around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. But in the bustle of the school morning, such subtleties went unnoticed. The morning passed uneventfully. Camilla taught her lessons, helped a student with a scraped knee during recess, and ate lunch with a few other teachers in the staff room. As the final bell rang at 3:15 p.m., she gathered her things and headed to her car, her mind already on the pile of essays she needed to grade that evening. It happened so fast that Camilla, she barely had time to register what was going on. One moment she was fumbling for her keys. The next a rough hand was clamped over her mouth, and she was being shoved into the back of a van. The vehicle peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. The scene unfolded with Lyle, disguised in a ski mask and gloves, forcefully commanding Camilla to remain low and silent. His voice was deliberately altered, harsh and unfamiliar. Camilla, overwhelmed by fear, could do nothing but obey, her body trembling uncontrollably as the van raced through Millbrook streets. Simultaneously, Ryan was pacing anxiously in his living room, gripping his phone tightly. At precisely 3:45 p.m., Lyle's call came through as planned. He tersely informed Ryan that everything was in place, instructing him to prepare for his role in their scheme. With shaking hands, Ryan dialed 911. Despite having practiced this moment repeatedly, he found himself faltering as he spoke to the dispatcher. His voice quavered as he reported his wife's supposed kidnapping and the alleged ransom note, pleading desperately for assistance. The narrative captures the tension and anxiety of the unfolding events, portraying Lyle's menacing demeanor, Camilla's genuine terror, and Ryan's nervous performance as he sets their plan in motion. The next few hours passed in a blur. Police officers swarmed the Watson house, asking questions, taking notes, setting up a command center in the living room. Ryan played his part to perfection, alternating between frantic concern and stunned disbelief. He handed over the fake ransom note Lyle had prepared, watched as it was bagged for evidence, and answered the detective's questions with just the right mix of cooperation and distress. As night fell, Ryan excused himself and slipped out to the backyard, ostensibly for some air. In reality, he was checking the GPS tracker he'd planted on Camilla's car. According to the app on his phone, the car was parked at an abandoned farmhouse about 15 miles outside of town, exactly where it was supposed to be. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. Everything was going according to plan. In a few hours, he would make his move, staging a daring rescue that would cement his place as Camilla's hero. He could almost see it now, the gratitude in her eyes, the renewed passion in their relationship. Everything would be perfect. But as he stood there in the darkness, a cool breeze rustling the leaves around him, Ryan couldn't quite shake a nagging feeling of unease. Something about the situation felt off, though he couldn't put his finger on what. Shaking his head to clear it, he took a deep breath and headed back inside. It was almost time for his grand performance. As news of Camilla Watson's abduction spread through Millbrook, the sleepy town transformed into a hive of activity. Police cars patrolled the streets, their lights cutting through the gathering darkness. Volunteers gathered at the community center, ready to form search parties. Inside the house, Detective Fiona Reeves took charge of the investigation. A seasoned officer with 20 years of experience. Reeves had seen her fair share of crimes, but kidnappings were rare in this part of the country. She studied Ryan Watson carefully as he recounted the events of the day for what seemed like the 100th time. The scene depicted Ryan's performance as the distraught husband, his voice breaking with apparent emotion as he expressed disbelief at the situation. He emphasized Camilla's kind nature, questioning who could possibly want to harm her. Detective Reeves responded with professional composure, her tone a balance of gentleness and authority. She pressed Ryan for details, inquiring about any recent threats or suspicious communications Camilla might have received. Ryan maintained his facade of confusion, denying any such occurrences. However, he inadvertently hinted at some underlying issues in their life, quickly attempting to backtrack when he realized his mistake. The detective's interest was piqued by this slip. She probed further, asking Ryan to elaborate on his comment about things not being normal. Momentarily thrown off script, Ryan scrambled to cover his error. He hastily attributed his remark to common stressors like work and financial pressures, trying to downplay any significance. While Reeves outwardly accepted this explanation, she mentally flagged it for further investigation. Her experience told her that kidnappings were rarely random events, and she suspected there was more to the Watson story than Ryan was revealing. She resolved to delve deeper into their personal circumstances, knowing that the key to solving such cases often lay in uncovering hidden connections and motivations. As the night wore on, the investigation expanded. Officers were dispatched to canvass the neighborhood around Millbrook Elementary. Security camera footage was collected from nearby businesses. Camilla's colleagues and friends were interviewed, building a picture of her last known movements. Through it all, Ryan maintained his facade of the distraught husband. He paced. He fretted. He made impassioned pleas to the cameras outside. But beneath the act, a current of excitement ran through him. Soon he thought it would be time for the rescue. Soon he would be the hero. What Ryan didn't realize was that with each passing hour, with each statement and plea, he was weaving a web of lies that would soon begin to tangle around him. As Detective Reeves and her team dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge, small at first, but growing larger with each new piece of information. The stage was set for a dramatic unraveling of Ryan's carefully constructed plan. As the clock ticked past midnight, the situation at the abandoned farmhouse was spiraling out of control. Lyle Dawson, fueled by a toxic mixture of adrenaline and methamphetamine, was becoming increasingly erratic. The fake kidnapping, which was supposed to be a straightforward job, had awakened something dark within him. Camilla, bound to a chair in what had once been the farmhouse's kitchen, watched her captor with growing terror. The man before her bore little resemblance to the cool professional criminal she had imagined. Instead, Lyle paced the room like a caged animal, muttering to himself and occasionally lashing out at imaginary threats. The scene opened with Camilla, her voice raw from fear and thirst, pleading with her captor to release her. She desperately promised to keep silent about the ordeal. Lyle reacted violently to her words, turning on her with a frenzied look in his eyes. He aggressively silenced her, his face uncomfortably close as he hinted at larger motives behind the kidnapping. Confused and terrified, Camilla pressed for more information. Lyle, caught between caution and a desire to boast, eventually gave in to the latter. He launched into a manic explanation, revealing that the kidnapping was initially orchestrated by Ryan in a misguided attempt to play the hero and salvage their relationship. Camilla was stunned by this revelation. The idea that Ryan could be behind her ordeal seemed unthinkable, yet a part of her recognized the desperate logic that might have driven him to such an extreme act. However, Lyle wasn't done with his confessions. His eyes glinting dangerously, he unveiled his own scheme. He had decided to double-cross Ryan, seeing an opportunity for a much bigger payday. Aware of Camilla's father's profession and likely wealth, Lyle planned to extort a substantial ransom from him instead. This turn of events left Camilla reeling, trapped between the betrayal of her husband's actions and the escalating danger of Lyle's greed-driven plot. As the implications of Lyle's words sank in, Camilla felt a fresh wave of terror wash over her. This wasn't a controlled situation anymore. This unstable, drug-addled man was going off script, turning a fake kidnapping into a very real one. Miles away, Ryan was growing increasingly anxious. According to the plan, Lyle should have contacted him by now with the location for the rescue. But his phone remained stubbornly silent, unable to sit still any longer. Ryan slipped away from the police command center in his living room and drove to the farmhouse, his heart pounding with each passing mile. The narrative shifted to Ryan as he approached the rundown building where Lyle was holding Camilla. A dim light flickered in one of the lower windows, guiding him closer. He parked at a distance and stealthily moved towards the structure, listening intently for any sounds from within. What he heard chilled him to his core. Lyle's voice, unexpectedly loud and aggressive, carried through the night air. His words revealed that he had deviated from their agreed plan, declaring himself in charge of the situation. Ryan watched in dismay as his meticulously crafted scheme crumbled before him. With trembling hands, he retrieved his phone, poised to dial 911. However, before he could make the call, a terrifying scream shattered the night. Unmistakably, Camilla's voice. The scream was abruptly cut off by a disturbing thud, followed by an eerie silence. In that horrifying moment, the full weight of his actions crashed down on Ryan. He realized with devastating clarity that his poorly conceived plan had spiraled wildly out of control, leading to unforeseen and potentially tragic consequences that he had never anticipated. The scene captured the mounting tension and Ryan's growing horror as he confronted the dire reality of the situation he had set in motion. The scream galvanized Ryan into action. Abandoning all caution, he rushed towards the farmhouse. His heart pounding so loudly, he was sure it would give him away. As he burst through the door, the scene that greeted him was like something out of a nightmare. Camilla lay crumpled on the floor, a thin trickle of blood running from her temple. Lyle stood over her, a broken chair leg clutched in his trembling hands. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, the air thick with shock and the acrid smell of fear. The scene opened with Ryan's horrified whisper. Breaking the tense silence, Lyle, clearly shaken, looked between Ryan and Camilla's motionless form with unfocused eyes. Lyle stammered out an explanation, claiming he had only meant to silence Camilla, not harm her. His words betrayed his panic, and the unintended escalation of the situation. Ryan rushed to check on Camilla. Desperately searching for signs of life, he found a pulse, weak but present, and breathed a sigh of relief. As the reality of the situation set in, Lyle began to panic, insisting they needed to flee. However, Ryan, focused on Camilla's well-being, reached for his phone to call for medical help. Lyle, driven by fear and likely intoxication, reacted with unexpected swiftness. He knocked the phone from Ryan's hand and pinned him against the wall, threatening him with an improvised weapon. With his breath reeking of alcohol, Lyle growled a warning against involving the police. He reminded Ryan of his role in initiating the scheme and demanded his help in escaping the situation. The scene captured the rapid deterioration of their plan, the mounting tension between Ryan and Lyle, and the dire circumstances they now faced with Camilla injured and unconscious. For several tense moments they grappled, Ryan's desperation to reach Camilla giving him strength he didn't know he possessed. In the struggle, Lyle's elbow caught the edge of an old cabinet. With a cry of pain, he loosened his grip just enough for Ryan to break free. Ryan lunged for his phone, but Lyle was on him again in an instant. The chair leg swung in blind panic, connected with Ryan's head with a sickening crack. Ryan felt a burst of pain, then nothing as darkness engulfed him. When Ryan came to, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The frantic energy that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. As his vision cleared, he saw Lyle sprawled on the floor nearby, the chair leg still clutched in his lifeless hand. A pool of blood spread slowly from a gash on Lyle's head, where he had apparently fallen against the sharp edge of the old stove. Ignoring the throbbing pain in his own head, Ryan crawled to Camilla. To his immense relief, her breathing seemed stronger now, though she remained unconscious. With trembling hands, he finally managed to call 911. His voice breaking as he tried to explain a situation he himself could hardly believe. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, urgent voices, and probing questions. Paramedics stabilized Camilla and rushed her to the hospital. Police swarmed the old farmhouse, cordoning it off as a crime scene. And Ryan found himself trying to piece together a story that would make sense of the chaos. A story that wouldn't implicate him in the disastrous events of the night. But as Detective Reeves listened to Ryan's stammering explanation, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. The pieces weren't fitting together, and she could sense the fear and desperation rolling off the man in waves. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Reeves knew that this was far from over. The truth, whatever it might be, was yet to come to light, and she was determined to uncover it, no matter where it led. In the days that followed, the facade Ryan had so carefully constructed began to crumble. Detective Reeves, her instincts honed by years on the force, methodically picked apart his story, exposing the inconsistencies and half-truths. The GPS tracker in Camilla's car was the first domino to fall. When questioned about it, Ryan's explanation was weak and unconvincing. Then came the phone records showing multiple calls to Lyle Dawson in the weeks leading up to the kidnapping. Each new piece of evidence tightened the noose around Ryan's neck. Camilla, recovering in the hospital, was at first reluctant to believe the truth about her husband's involvement. But as the evidence mounted, she was forced to confront the reality of Ryan's desperate scheme. The mixture of emotions, betrayal, anger, and a strange sort of pity left her reeling. It was Camilla's statement that finally broke the case wide open. She recounted Lyle's drug-fueled confession, filling in the gaps in the investigation. As she spoke, the full picture of Ryan's plan with all its misguided intentions and tragic consequences, came into focus. Faced with the overwhelming evidence in Camilla's testimony, Ryan's resolve finally crumbled. In a tear-filled confession to Detective Reeves, he laid out the entire ill-fated plan, from its inception in a dingy bar to its violent conclusion in the abandoned farmhouse. "I just wanted her to love me again," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt, but good intentions Detective Reeves knew were no defense against the law." As she placed Ryan under arrest, reading him his rights in the antiseptic corridors of the hospital, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. What had begun as a misguided attempt to save a marriage had ended in death and destruction, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution painted a damning picture of Ryan's actions. The premeditation, the elaborate planning, the reckless disregard for his wife's well-being, all of it. Ryan Watson was found guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, conspiracy, and involuntary manslaughter for Lyle Dawson's death. The judge, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and its traumatic impact on Camilla, sentenced Ryan to 25 years in prison. As Ryan was led away in handcuffs, the reality of what he had done seemed to finally hit him. The man who had once dreamed of being a hero now faced a future as a convicted felon, his desperate gamble having cost him everything he had hoped to save. At the center of this storm were three individuals whose lives would become inextricably entangled. Thaddeus Bracey, a 32-year-old personal trainer with a body chiseled from marble, had built a reputation as the go-to fitness guru. Among his newest clients was Julia Ashworth, a 45-year-old socialite known for her impeccable taste. Julia was the very picture of suburban success. Intelligent, beautiful, and married to Luke Ashworth, a 50-year-old real estate mogul whose name graced half the commercial buildings in the nearby city. The Ashworths were the golden couple of Oak Ridge Heights. Their sprawling Georgian-style mansion hosted the most coveted parties, and their philanthropic efforts made headlines in the local press. To the outside world, they embodied the American dream, successful, charitable, and deeply in love. But as with many stories that begin in seeming perfection, cracks were forming in the foundation of the Ashworths' world. These fissures would provide the perfect entry point for Thaddeus Bracey, a man whose own past was shrouded in mystery and marked by a determination to rise above his humble beginnings. Little did anyone know that the arrival of Thaddeus in the Ashworths' lives would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to passion, betrayal, and ultimately, a confrontation that would leave the community reeling and one person dead. Thaddeus Bracey's journey to becoming Oak Ridge Heights' most sought-after personal trainer was far from smooth. Born in a struggling neighborhood of Detroit, Thaddeus grew up in a world where survival often trumped ambition. His father, a factory worker, died when Thaddeus was just 10, leaving his mother to raise him and his two younger sisters on a meager salary. From an early age, Thaddeus found solace and strength in physical fitness. The local community center became his second home, where he spent countless hours lifting weights and running on old treadmills. It was here that he first dreamed of a life beyond the confines of his neighborhood. At 18, Thaddeus enlisted in the Army, seeing it as his ticket out. During his 4-year service, he honed his body and mind, earning accolades for his physical prowess and leadership skills. However, his military career came to an abrupt end when he was honorably discharged following a controversial incident involving a superior officer, the details of which Thaddeus never fully disclosed. Upon returning to civilian life, Thaddeus leveraged his military experience and physical conditioning into a career as a personal trainer. He started small, working at budget gyms and taking on any client he could find. His dedication, combined with his natural charisma, soon earned him a devoted following. 5 years before the events that would change everything, Thaddeus made the calculated decision to move to Oak Ridge Heights. He saw the affluent suburb as fertile ground for his ambitions, a place where his skills could command premium prices. Within 2 years, he had established himself as the trainer to the stars, his past struggles hidden behind a veneer of success and confidence. Luke and Julia Ashworth's marriage was the stuff of local legend. They had met 20 years earlier at a charity auction, where Luke, already a rising star in real estate, had outbid everyone for a date with Julia, then a recent college graduate working in public relations. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a lavish wedding just 6 months later, covered extensively by the local media. For the first decade of their marriage, Luke and Julia seemed to have it all. Luke's business acumen led to the rapid expansion of his real estate empire, while Julia's social skills and philanthropic efforts made them the darlings of Oak Ridge Heights high society. They traveled the world, donated generously to local causes, and hosted events that were the talk of the town. However, as the years wore on, subtle tensions began to emerge. Luke's workaholic tendencies meant he was often absent, leaving Julia to manage their social life and household alone. Their inability to conceive a child, despite years of trying and expensive fertility treatments, added strain to their relationship. To the outside world, the Ashworths maintained a united front. They still attended events arm in arm, smiling for cameras and exchanging loving glances. But behind closed-door silence and resentment were becoming more common than intimate conversations. Julia threw herself into her charity work and social engagements while Luke spent increasingly long hours at the office. By the time Thaddeus entered their lives, the Ashworths' marriage was a beautifully crafted facade hiding a growing emotional distance that neither was fully ready to acknowledge. The fateful first encounter between Thaddeus and Luke occurred at the Oak Ridge Heights Country Club, where Julia had begun taking personal training sessions with Thaddeus. Luke, finishing a round of golf, happened upon them as Thaddeus was demonstrating a stretch to Julia. Luke's eyes were immediately drawn to Thaddeus's physique, a fact he would later struggle to admit to himself. Thaddeus, ever the professional, greeted Luke with his trademark winning smile and a firm handshake that lingered a moment too long. As Julia enthusiastically praised Thaddeus's skills as a trainer, Luke found himself captivated by the younger man's confidence and easy charm. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on fitness, business, and their shared love of vintage cars. Before parting ways, Luke surprised himself by expressing interest in personal training sessions. Thaddeus, sensing an opportunity, suggested a trial session at the Ashworth home gym. As Luke watched Thaddeus walk away, he felt a flutter of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. For his part, Thaddeus knew he had made an impression on the powerful Mr. Ashworth, an impression he was determined to capitalize on, both professionally and personally. The first private training session between Thaddeus and Luke took place on a crisp autumn morning in the Ashworth state-of-the-art home gym. Julia had left early for a charity board meeting, leaving the two men alone in the sprawling mansion as Thaddeus guided Luke through a series of exercises. The sexual tension between them was palpable. Luke found himself hyper-aware of Thaddeus's touch as the trainer adjusted his form. Their eyes met in the mirror, lingering longer than necessary. Thaddeus, sensing Luke's interest, subtly increased the intimacy of his instructions, his hands ghosting over Luke's body under the guise of professional guidance. By the end of the session, both men were breathless, and not just from the physical exertion. As Luke toweled off, Thaddeus made his move. He complimented Luke's physique, noting how responsive his body was to instruction. The innuendo was clear, and Luke, his defenses lowered by endorphins and long-suppressed desire, didn't resist when Thaddeus leaned in for a kiss. What followed was a passionate encounter that left both men exhilarated and conflicted. For Luke, it was a revelation, a chance to explore feelings he had long buried beneath his heterosexual marriage and public persona. For Thaddeus, it was a mixture of genuine attraction and calculated risk, knowing that an affair with Luke could either elevate or destroy his carefully constructed life in Oak Ridge Heights. In the aftermath, as they lay catching their breath on the gym floor, reality began to seep back in. Luke, guilt washing over him, started to stammer out apologies and excuses. Thaddeus, ever the smooth operator, reassured him this could be their secret. He suggested no one needed to know. They were both adults, both seeking something their current lives couldn't provide. Why not indulge? Luke, torn between his loyalty to Julia and his newfound passion, ultimately agreed to continue the affair. They set ground rules. Discretion was paramount, and their encounters would be limited to training sessions when Julia was away. Over the next few months, Thaddeus and Luke's affair intensified. What started as purely physical quickly developed emotional undertones. Luke found himself opening up to Thaddeus about his frustrations with work and his marriage in a way he never had with anyone else. Thaddeus, in turn, shared carefully curated stories from his past, painting himself as a sensitive soul beneath his confident exterior. Their rendezvous became more frequent and daring. Quick encounters in the home gym expanded to steamy sessions in high-end hotel rooms and secluded spots around Oak Ridge Heights. Each time, they promised it would be the last, but neither could resist the pull of their forbidden romance. As their emotional connection deepened, so did the risks they were willing to take. Close calls became more frequent, a lingering touch at a charity event, a heated glance across a crowded restaurant. The thrill of nearly being caught only added to the intensity of their affair. Little did they know their web of secrecy was about to unravel, setting in motion a series of events that would shake the foundations of Oak Ridge Heights, and lead to consequences neither man could have foreseen. As Thaddeus and Luke's affair intensified, so did the complexity of their deceptions. Luke, once a man of routine, began crafting elaborate excuses for his absences and changes in schedule. Late nights at the office became more frequent, with Luke claiming he was working on a major development deal that required his constant attention. Weekend golf games stretched into all-day affairs, supposedly due to networking opportunities with potential clients. Thaddeus, for his part, juggled his growing client list with precision, always ensuring he had a plausible reason to be near Luke. He cultivated friendships with other Oak Ridge Heights residents, using their sessions as cover for his frequent presence in the neighborhood. He even went so far as to start a fitness class at the country club, providing a legitimate reason for his car to be parked there at odd hours. Thaddeus invented a high-maintenance client called Eloise, whose demands for last-minute sessions explained his sudden schedule changes. The stress of maintaining these falsehoods took its toll. Luke, once known for his sharp memory, found himself struggling to keep track of his own lies. He began keeping a coded journal hidden in his office safe to maintain the consistency of his stories. Thaddeus, ever meticulous, created a complex calendar system on his phone, with layers of fake appointments hiding the truth of his whereabouts. As months passed, their web of deceit grew ever more tangled. Each lie required another to support it, and soon both men found themselves living in a parallel reality of their own creation. The thrill of their secret rendezvous was increasingly tainted by the constant fear of discovery, yet neither could bring themselves to end the affair. While Thaddeus and Luke were entangled in their affair, Julia Ashworth was far from oblivious. At first, the changes in her husband were subtle: a new cologne, a sudden interest in fitness, longer hours at the office. She initially attributed these changes to a midlife renaissance, even feeling a spark of hope that it might rejuvenate their stagnant marriage. However, as weeks turned to months, Julia's instincts began to sound alarms. Luke's emotional distance, once a dull ache in their relationship, now felt like a chasm. His excuses for missed dinners and social engagements grew more elaborate and less convincing. She noticed him guarding his phone, angling the screen away when she entered a room. Julia's suspicions began to affect her daily life. She found herself analyzing every conversation, searching for inconsistencies in Luke's stories. Her normally impeccable focus during charity meetings wavered as her mind raced with possibilities. Was Luke having an affair? Was it with a colleague or perhaps a younger woman? The irony that Thaddeus, her own personal trainer, was at the center of her marital turmoil eluded her completely. In fact, Julia often confided in Thaddeus during their sessions, unaware that she was sharing her fears with the very man causing them. Thaddeus, in a display of psychological acrobatics, offered her comfort and advice, all while continuing his affair with her husband. As her suspicions grew, Julia began to withdraw from her social circles, fearful that she was the subject of local gossip. Her charity work, once a source of joy and purpose, became a performance where she struggled to maintain her composure. At home, the silence between her and Luke grew heavier, filled with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. Determined to uncover the truth, Julia decided to take matters into her own hands, setting in motion a series of events that would ultimately lead to a confrontation with devastating consequences. The fragile equilibrium of Thaddeus and Luke's secret affair was shattered one rainy Tuesday afternoon when Thaddeus received an anonymous text message. The contents were chilling. A clear photograph of him and Luke in an intimate embrace, taken through the window of their favorite hotel room. The message that followed was succinct: $50K or this goes public, you have 48 hours. Panic set in immediately. Thaddeus's carefully constructed world in Oak Ridge Heights teetered on the brink of collapse. His reputation, his business, everything he had worked for was at risk. But more than that, the threat extended to Luke. Exposure would mean the end of his marriage, potential professional ruin, and public humiliation. Thaddeus immediately contacted Luke, arranging an urgent meeting under the guise of an emergency training session. In the secluded corner of a 24-hour gym, Thaddeus showed Luke the threatening message. Luke's face drained of color as he realized the precariousness of their situation. The next 48 hours were a frenzy of activity as they scrambled to gather the funds without raising suspicion. Luke, despite his wealth, found himself in a liquidity crunch due to ongoing real estate developments. He was forced to take out a high-interest loan, claiming it was for a time-sensitive business opportunity. Thaddeus liquidated his savings and maxed out his credit cards, telling his bank he was planning to open a new gym. As the deadline approached, the strain began to show. Luke became irritable and distracted, snapping at colleagues and avoiding Julia even more than usual. Thaddeus's typically flawless training sessions were marred by distraction and anxiety, leading to complaints from some of his high-profile clients. With just hours to spare, they managed to cobble together the required amount. Following the blackmailer's instructions, Thaddeus made the drop at a designated location, a nondescript locker at the Oak Ridge Heights bus terminal. As he walked away, having secured a promise that all evidence would be destroyed, Thaddeus felt a mix of relief and deepening dread. Who was behind this? Could they trust that it was truly over? The blackmail incident left both men shaken. What had once been an exhilarating secret was now a source of constant fear. Every unexpected phone call, every lingering glance from a stranger on the street became a potential threat. The passion that had fueled their affair was now tempered by paranoia. Moreover, the financial strain of the blackmail payment introduced new tensions. Luke, forced to explain the sudden loan to his business partners, found himself entangled in more lies. Thaddeus, his savings depleted, began to take on more clients and longer hours, leaving less time for their clandestine meetings. As they grappled with these new realities, neither man realized that their actions had not gone unnoticed. The withdrawn funds, the secretive meetings, the sudden changes in behavior, all of these had caught the attention of someone much closer to home. Julia Ashworth, her suspicions now a raging fire, had decided it was time to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Driven by a mixture of suspicion, hurt, and determination, Julia Ashworth embarked on a mission to uncover the truth behind her husband's increasingly erratic behavior. Her first step was to hire Rhonda Vesper, a discreet but highly effective private investigator recommended by a fellow socialite who had gone through a messy divorce. Rhonda began her investigation with meticulous precision. She set up surveillance on Luke, tracking his movements and photographing his encounters. Initially, the evidence seemed innocuous. Long hours at the office, business meetings at upscale restaurants, and frequent visits to the gym. However, as days turned into weeks, patterns began to emerge that didn't quite add up. Luke's supposed late-night meetings often coincided with times when Thaddeus' car was spotted in the vicinity. The gym visits extended far beyond reasonable workout times, with Luke and Thaddeus frequently leaving within minutes of each other. Rhonda's photographs captured lingering glances and seemingly casual touches that hinted at a deeper connection. As Rhonda dug deeper, she uncovered financial discrepancies that raised further red flags. The large, unexplained loan Luke had taken out, coupled with numerous cash withdrawals from both men's accounts, pointed to some sort of shared secret or mutual blackmail. Julia, upon receiving Rhonda's detailed reports, felt her world crumbling around her. The possibility that Luke was having an affair was painful enough, but the realization that it might be with Thaddeus, a man she had trusted and confided in, was almost unbearable. Determined to gather irrefutable evidence, Julia took matters into her own hands. She installed a hidden camera in Luke's home office and placed a discreet tracking device on his car. She began to pay closer attention to Thaddeus during their training sessions, noting how he skillfully deflected questions about Luke's fitness progress. The final piece of evidence came on a Tuesday afternoon, when Julia, acting on a hunch, decided to surprise Luke at his office. As she approached his private conference room, she heard muffled voices peering through a crack in the door. She saw Luke and Thaddeus in an intimate embrace, their conversation, a mix of endearments and worried whispers about someone who was watching them. In that moment, as her suspicions were confirmed in the most painful way possible, Julia felt a surge of emotions, betrayal, anger, and a steely resolve. She quietly retreated, her mind racing with plans for confrontation and retribution. The stage was set for a showdown that would change all of their lives forever. The day of reckoning arrived on a stormy Friday evening. Julia, armed with a folder full of evidence and a heart full of rage, waited for Luke in their expansive living room. She had sent the household staff away for the weekend, ensuring complete privacy for what she knew would be an explosive confrontation. When Luke walked through the door, shaking rain from his coat, he was met with an icy stare from his wife. Julia, her voice eerily calm, asked him to sit down. Confused and slightly alarmed by her demeanor, Luke complied, his mind racing to recall if he had forgotten an important date or event. Julia began by sliding the folder across the coffee table. As Luke opened it, his face drained of color. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and a detailed timeline of his affair with Thaddeus. Julia watched, her composure cracking, as Luke's expressions cycled through shock, shame, and finally desperate denial. "Luke, you've been lying to me for months," Julia said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Luke, realizing the futility of further deception, attempted to explain. He spoke of feeling trapped, of rediscovering himself, of the unexpected connection he had found with Thaddeus. His words meant to clarify, only stoked the fires of Julia's anger. The argument escalated quickly. Years of unspoken resentments and frustrations poured out. Julia hurled accusations of betrayal and selfishness, while Luke countered with complaints of emotional distance and feeling unfulfilled. The elegant living room, usually a showcase of their perfect life, now echoed with harsh words and bitter recriminations. As the confrontation reached a fever pitch, the doorbell rang. Julia, her face flushed with anger, strode to answer it, expecting to find a concerned neighbor drawn by the shouting. Instead, she found Thaddeus on the doorstep, soaked from the rain, and wearing an expression of confusion and alarm. Seizing his arm, Julia dragged Thaddeus into the house, forcing a three-way confrontation. Thaddeus, caught off guard, looked to Luke for guidance but found only panic in his lover's eyes. The atmosphere in the room shifted from anger to something more dangerous, a volatile mix of fear, jealousy, and desperation. Julia demanded answers from Thaddeus, her words laced with venom. She accused him of manipulating his way into their lives, of using his position as her trainer to seduce her husband. Thaddeus, his usual confidence shattered, attempted to defend himself, but his words seemed hollow in the face of Julia's fury. Luke, seeing Thaddeus under attack, felt a surge of protectiveness. He moved to stand between his wife and his lover, a gesture that only inflamed Julia's rage. In a moment of blind anger, she grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a nearby table and swung it at Luke. What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds, but would have repercussions that would last a lifetime. Luke, instinctively ducking, caused the vase to miss him and strike Thaddeus squarely on the temple. The impact was sickeningly loud in the sudden silence that followed. Thaddeus staggered, his eyes unfocused before collapsing to the floor. Blood began to pool around his head, staining the expensive Persian rug a deep crimson. Julia and Luke stood frozen, the gravity of what had just occurred slowly sinking in. In that moment, as the storm raged outside and Thaddeus lay motionless on their living room floor, the lives of all three were irrevocably altered. The perfect facade of Oak Ridge Heights' golden couple had not just cracked, it had shattered completely, with consequences none of them could have foreseen. The moments following Thaddeus' collapse were a blur of panic and frantic activity. Luke, his legal training kicking in despite the shock, immediately called 911. Julia, her anger evaporating into horror, attempted to stem the bleeding with a nearby throw pillow, her trembling hands quickly becoming stained with Thaddeus' blood. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the quiet suburban night. They worked efficiently, assessing Thaddeus' condition with grim expressions. Despite their best efforts, it was clear that the situation was dire. The blow to Thaddeus' temple had caused severe trauma, and he remained unresponsive as they prepared him for transport. As the ambulance sped away, its lights flashing in the rain-slicked streets, Luke and Julia were left to face the aftermath of their actions. The living room, once a showcase of their perfect life, now resembled a crime scene. Blood stained the expensive rug. The overturned furniture bore witness to their violent confrontation, and shards of the crystal vase glittered ominously in the dim light. At the hospital, a team of doctors fought to save Thaddeus's life. Hours passed in a haze of tense waiting and hushed conversations. Luke and Julia sat in separate corners of the waiting room, the weight of their shared secret and mutual recriminations keeping them apart, even in this moment of crisis. As dawn broke, a somber-faced doctor approached them. Despite all efforts, Thaddeus had succumbed to his injuries. The blunt force trauma to his head had caused irreparable brain damage, and he had slipped away in the early hours of the morning. The news hit Luke and Julia like a physical blow. In the span of a few hours, their lives had been upended in ways they could never have imagined. Their perfect world had not only been revealed as a facade, but had crumbled entirely, leaving a man dead in its wake. As they sat in stunned silence, the reality of their situation began to sink in. This was no longer just about an affair or a betrayed marriage. They were now at the center of a potential homicide investigation. The sound of approaching footsteps broke their reverie. 2 police officers, their faces serious, were walking towards them. In that moment, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, Luke and Julia Ashworth knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The golden couple of Oak Ridge Heights was about to face a reckoning that would shake their community to its core. The death of Thaddeus Bracey quickly became the focus of an intense police investigation. Detective Imogen Sloan, a veteran of the Oak Ridge Heights Police Department, was assigned to lead the case. Known for her sharp intellect and unwavering dedication, Detective Sloan approached the investigation with meticulous care. The Ashworth residence was cordoned off as a crime scene, with forensic teams combing through every inch of the property. The crystal vase, now a crucial piece of evidence, was carefully bagged and sent for analysis. Flood spatter patterns were studied, and every surface was dusted for fingerprints. Luke and Julia were subjected to hours of grueling interrogations. Their statements, initially given separately, were cross-referenced and scrutinized for inconsistencies. The couple's attempt to present a united front quickly crumbled under Detective Sloan's skilled questioning. As the investigation deepened, more details emerged. The financial transactions related to the blackmail came to light, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Thaddeus's past, including his military service and the mysterious incident that led to his discharge, became subjects of intense scrutiny. Detective Sloan also focused on the wider circle of Oak Ridge Heights society. Interviews with the Ashworths' friends, neighbors, and business associates painted a picture of a couple whose perfect image had been carefully cultivated, but was far from reality. As weeks passed, the investigation began to point towards a charge of involuntary manslaughter. The evidence suggested that while Thaddeus' death was not premeditated, it was the direct result of Julia's actions during a heated confrontation. The stage was set for a trial that would captivate the nation and tear apart the fabric of Oak Ridge Heights high society. Julia's defense team, headed by the high-profile attorney Jameson Drake, argued that the death was a tragic accident, the result of a highly emotional confrontation rather than any intent to harm. They emphasized Julia's philanthropic work and standing in the community, portraying her as a victim of her husband's infidelity, who had acted out of character in a moment of extreme distress. The trial lasted 4 weeks, captivating the nation with its mix of sex betrayal and suburban scandal. Luke's testimony proved particularly damaging as he struggled to reconcile his loyalty to Julia with the truth of his affair with Thaddeus. In the end, the jury found Julia guilty of involuntary manslaughter, the judge taking into account her lack of prior criminal history and the circumstances of the case sentenced her to 5 years in prison, a decision that sparked debate about privilege and justice in America. Luke, while not criminally charged, faced civil lawsuits from Thaddeus's family and the collapse of his business empire as clients distanced themselves from the scandal. As Julia was led away to begin her sentence, the once golden couple of Oak Ridge Heights had been reduced to cautionary tales, their fall from grace complete and irreversible.